She didn't smile back, but I could see a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. As many of you know, my hero name is Amazoness, she began in a strong, clear voice. You may call me Miss Corcoran. Gemma Corcoran, to be precise. I'll be your primary instructor here at Valcav for the next few years. I've already met each of you personally and am excited to see where the academy takes you. She let that sink in before continuing. This semester, you'll focus on rescues, and you'll be attending a rescue class over the next few months. Your primary rescue instructor will be City Master, also known as Lars Shoemaker. If you have any concerns about the class, speak to him. To their credit, even the barbers had their full attention locked on Gemma as she folded her arms over her stomach. Now, some of you may wonder why we even have a rescue class, but rescuing a civilian life is never as easy as it sounds. Every villain has an unpredictable nature, and each understands that a hero will not waste their time in pointless combat while an innocent life is on the line. Villains will always try to use your morality against you. They will place you in positions where you may have to choose between loved ones and the fate of an entire city. The greatest names in history are those who understand how to navigate these difficult waters and save as many lives as possible. Her eyes lingered on me for a moment. Then she sighed and passed her gaze over the rest of the students once again. For hundreds of years, heroes have walked among humanity and defended it from the worst evils. But to be powered is not to be a hero. A hero is a title that you earn, and to be powered is what you are. It does not entitle you to anything more than a duty that you may or may not accept in the years to come. I heard a tisk behind me and glanced back to see Brad with his arms crossed, a grumpy line furrowed between his brows. Gemma noticed it as well and gestured for him to speak with her manicured hand. Is there a problem with that, Mr. O'Connor? Obviously, Brad sneered. I'm not sure why it's my job to handhold a bunch of normies. They've got police, don't they? Sure, Gemma nodded, as she apparently ignored his blatant disrespect and hostility for the moment. The police clean the streets and protect it as best they can, but to fight a powered being is like fighting a nuclear weapon. Police have bullets and tear gas. Half of you are immune to them, and the other half can easily find a way around it. Even an untrained powered being is capable of destroying entire city blocks, given enough potential and persistence. It's not something that ordinary police can defend against, which is why there are heroes in the first place. But why should I care about what happens to a bunch of losers? Brad pressed. I rolled my eyes. And he was right. Brad seemed like an asshole in every sense of the word. Keep talking like that and you'll be dangling damsels off skyscrapers in no time, I said. Didn't ask you, Inferno boy. Enough, Gemma interjected, with steel in her voice. Mr. O'Connor, talk out of turn again and I'll send you out on your ass. If you need a lesson on why it's important to save lives, perhaps I should phone your mother and determine the root cause. Brad paled at that. Everyone had something they feared, even an asshole like him. No, he squeaked. I'm good. I'll shut up. Gemma cleared her throat and gestured at the blackboard behind her, where favorite superheroes was still written. I hope you've been considering an answer to this statement. I don't just want to know who your idol is. I want to know why. She gestured at the back of the room again. Brad, since you've helpfully offered your opinions thus far, I assume you have someone in mind? Nah, not really. He shook his head. He was going to be obstinate for the rest of the year at this rate. I felt Gemma's irritation as she ignored him again, and then gestured to Brad's left. Kristen. At first, Kristen didn't seem interested in saying anything either, But Gemma waited patiently, in no mood to let her pass by unnoticed. I watched as Kristen straightened her posture, her lips twisted with an uncomfortable grimace. "You already know what I'm going to say," she sighed and twisted her fingers in her lap. She didn't appreciate the dozen or so eyeballs glancing back at her with curious expressions. "That may be so, but it's as good a place as any to start." Gemma gestured for her to spit it out. Kristen rolled her eyes and glanced at her brother, then sighed. "My dad, naturally." "Icebreaker, you mean?" Gemma pressed. "Yeah," Kristen replied, a little hesitantly before pushing on. "He's retired now, but he's always been, a good guy." "He's mine, too," Matt added as he locked eyes with me again. I was uncomfortable with the way he seemed so determined to hate me every chance he got. Gemma noted the tension with a glance, but kept right on going with the lesson. "What's your favorite quality about Icebreaker, Kristen?" "Well, She struggled for an answer that wasn't, "because he's my dad." Matt piped up next to her as he glanced at his sister with some pity. "My dad doesn't fight anymore, but he did for a lot of years. Took a lot of beatings before he retired. Spent most of his time out in the field. I mean, we only saw him maybe once or twice a week. He sacrificed everything to make sure we were safe." "You admire his persistence, then?" Gemma asked with genuine interest. These were obviously the kinds of things she wanted to hear from us. Matt and Kristen both nodded. My mom liked to say that he... Kristen muttered something inaudible, and Gemma lifted a brow. "What was that?" "She'd say that Dad was the most stubborn man on the planet," Matt cut in. He reached for his sister's hand and held on to it. He wasn't looking at Gemma, though. He was looking at me. "I remember once he fought Lord Inferno for 3 days straight. Didn't sleep, didn't eat, did nothing but hold him back. That was the Battle of the Bay some years back." Gemma nodded, turned, and addressed the class at large. "Persistence, stubbornness. Icebreaker is legendary in this regard. He was a partner to one of the greatest heroes ever known, and then opposed that hero for years after Inferno fell into darkness. He's retired now, as many of you are aware. Where it is, he's settled somewhere in the Arctic." Quietly taking notes in the front row, Eliana raised her hand, and Gemma gestured for her to speak. "Miss Corcoran, why did Icebreaker retire? He wasn't that old, was he?" "Is," Matt corrected with no small amount of vehemence. "Right," Eliana blushed. "Is. The official story is that Icebreaker suffered an injury," Gemma said, somewhat diplomatic. Unfortunately, Matt was in no mood to be. "The truth is that after Nick's dad killed my mom, the fight sailed right out of him. He turned tail and ran a few years back." The room grew tense with that, and Gemma frowned. "Tragedy marks every Powered family, Mr. Barber. We're all sorry for your loss." Eliana raised her hand again. "Miss Corcoran, I don't understand. Did he flee or did he retire? If he fled, he's not much of a hero, is he?" This caused Matt to lurch up out of his chair, and I twisted around, ready to interfere if he got violent. "How dare!" I don't mean any offense. I was just..." Eliana pleaded, but Matt kept ranting at the poor girl. "My dad's a hero. He fought so many villains, saved so many lives. There's a statue of him on the bay next to all the other greats. They don't build statues for cowards." "Matt, that's enough," Gemma pressed firmly. "She meant nothing by it." Slowly, Matt settled back into his chair. He crossed his arms and pouted like a child. A deeply troubled, angry child, but a child nonetheless. Eliana blushed an even deeper shade of crimson. "I'm sorry." "It's all right, sweetheart," Gemma soothed before growing serious once more. "Icebringer is a hero in our history books, and he will forever be remembered as someone who sacrificed nearly everything to protect this city, as well as the world at large. If anything can be learned from his example, it is that one must be persistent in the fight against evil. It can take many forms, and will hurt you in any way that it can, so being prepared to fight at any cost is a good lesson to take home. It's one that Icebringer stood for, and one that he represented to the utmost of his ability." She swept her gaze over the class. "I led the conversation toward Icebringer first, because I was born in Otavale. Icebringer saved my family." A hush fell over the students, and once again Eliana raised her hand. "What happened in Otavale?" I rolled my eyes. Everyone knew about Otavale. "Lord Inferno seized the entire city," Gemma explained. "It was the last one to join his empire, and it resisted the hardest. The battle went on for 3 weeks, and in that span most of the buildings were destroyed. We still don't know how many fatalities there were. Icebringer was the vanguard that led the attack against Inferno, and later, the rescue efforts. We lost that battle and eventually the entire city, but Icebringer refused to leave until every single innocent life that could be saved was given a chance. He single-handedly escorted many beyond the border, including my family." "Wow," Eliana whispered. "He kept fighting, even after the city was gone?" "As a hero will do," Gemma said with utter conviction. "It's not about wins or losses. It's about how many you can save." Andy raised her hand. I glanced over and was surprised to see a nervous expression on her face. She cleared her throat. I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this, but my favorite is Inferno Before the Fall." My heart skipped several beats, and I wasn't sure how to feel about that. Gemma was surprised, and so was Matt, apparently. "What?" he growled. "Why would you favor that psychopath?" Andy's shoulders tensed up the way they had yesterday, before every single fight. I was certain that a fist was going to fly across the room if Matt pushed her hard enough. "Well, he wasn't always a psychopath, now was he?" she shot back with fire in her tone. "He was good once. The best, even. I'm not saying he's forgivable now, not with what he's done, but that doesn't mean we should forget all the good he did, too." I could see the steel forming in Eric's spine as he straightened up in his chair. "I agree. Inferno saved Volcav once. You remember, the fight against Laughing Mask? It was chronicled in the Best Heroes Edition 45. And he saved my mom," Andy interrupted, though she smiled at Eric to ease the brunt of it. "If it weren't for him, I wouldn't even exist. My mom met my dad in the rescue party." "My grandpa had all those posters," Eric added. Matt growled and shifted in his seat. I caught fangs when he snarled, "He's a mass murderer. An evil fucking language, Matt," Gemma warned as a frown formed on her lips. "No," he yelled furiously. "This is stupid. You can pick anyone else on the list, but Inferno isn't one of them." Matt crossed his arms, looking ready to explode. "Quiet down, Mr. Barber, or I'll be forced to send you out of class." Gemma stared at him until he looked away, before turning her attention back to Andy. "Ignore him, Miss Baker." She then gestured toward Eliana. "What's your favorite?" "Judgment," she said. I really like vampires." Everyone else in the class snickered, and the tension immediately eased. I was glad for it, to be honest. Who knew hero history could bring up so much bad blood so quickly? Brad rolled his eyes.
He's not actually a vampire, you moron.
Brad, enough, Gemma said, clearly done with him. Act like an adult or you'll be leaving along with Mr. Barber. Brad crossed his arms and glared at his desk, as Matt growled and did the same. Eliana blushed, but Eric piped up in her defense.
To be fair, we don't actually know if he's a vampire or not. Vampires don't exist, Brad said. You exist, Eric countered. I exist. Why not vampires?
It was obvious that Brad was embarrassed at how simply Eric had countered his argument, as he grumbled out,
Because it's dumb. He's not a vampire.
Gemma chuckled again and went back to the front of the class to lean against her desk. Is there another reason you like him, Eliana?
Well, he looks pretty cool when he's doing that shadow thing, she added.
Eric bobbed his head, apparently convinced.
Vampire.
Not a vampire, Brad muttered.
He doesn't sparkle now, does he? Exactly. Eric stuck his tongue out at Brad. Totally a vampire.
If nothing else, I was proud that Eric was willing to defend a point. He's obsessed about law and order, I said, trying to change the subject. Wasn't he some kind of lawyer back in the day? Gemma shook her head. A judge, actually. Hence the name. Judgment toes a line that many heroes find very uncomfortable. He follows the law to the letter, even if it costs a life. There is a moral argument here that has plagued even the brightest minds for well over a century. A hero who fights outside the law is considered a vigilante, but sometimes a villain uses the law to manipulate a hero into breaking their oaths. Judgment refuses to break the law, even when provoked, because he believes that the law should be sustained, that order is necessary for the survival of society. I'm inclined to agree, of course, but I also understand that the world doesn't operate in absolutes. Judgment believes otherwise, Christian said, her voice low and uncomfortable. It was one of his first lessons. He says that working outside the allowance of the law makes you vulnerable to those who would use it as a weapon to hurt others. He claims there is no exception.
Anyone who deals in absolutes isn't seeing the world very clearly, Andy argued. There are plenty of good people who fall outside the law, and they need saving too.
Gemma watched the exchange with interest. I hadn't been sure about the intent of this entire class, but then I realized she'd simply wanted us to debate the delicate morality and come up with our own conclusions. There was no right or wrong answer to any of this, but the more we thought about it, the more prepared we'd be. That brings up an interesting point, Gemma said. If someone robs a bank and then falls victim to a powered villain, are they worthy of saving? Matt didn't even hesitate. He shook his head and spat, No, he forfeited his life the second he hurt an innocent.
Stealing money isn't the same as murder, Matt. Andy rolled her eyes. It's a life. I'd save them, sure.
Judgment would as well, and then ensure the robber spent his time in jail. Gemma nodded with a thoughtful look. I believe you know this, Matt. He would not approve of your answer. Innocent life may be held in higher esteem than a criminal one, but it is a life all the same, and that matters. Heroes work to reform criminals. We do not leave them to die. Eliana raised her hand, and after Gemma's nod, she asked, What's the point in reforming a criminal when they're just going to do it again once they're free? No one knows that for certain, Kara spoke up. She glanced at me, then at Eliana. Anyone can be redeemed. Matt snorted at the very notion, and I knew exactly what he was thinking. I swore if he brought up my father again. I tend to agree, Gemma smiled. Criminals are often the symptom of a much bigger issue.
Poverty, for instance, or political strife. Education and reformation go a long way to fixing these problems. Matt twisted in his seat like he wanted to jump out the window. But there are limits. You can't save everybody. You don't know that until you try, Matt, Gemma said firmly. But it's a waste of time. Matt's argument struck me as dumb. You didn't give up on people. Even my dad, if the right person did the right thing. Is it? Gemma countered, her voice an echo to my thoughts. Matt rolled his eyes. Yes, it is. Your mentor would disagree, Gemma reminded him. He sighed and glanced out the window. I wasn't certain if he was thoughtful or had just given up the ghost entirely. Gemma, I cleared my throat and stammered, Miss Corcoran, I mean. Who's your favorite hero? Triton, she grinned. Should be obvious. He's been my crime-fighting partner for years. What do you like about him? I asked with genuine curiosity. Gemma glanced upward while she considered that. His creativity, she said eventually. He's good with water, but he doesn't use it in the traditional fashion. You see, most people, when they talk powers, they prefer the big, fascinating kinds. Lots of fire, lots of ice, lots of pretty effects and bright, shining lights. But Triton is a good example of someone with a relatively tame power set who can take on nearly any opponent effectively. He's smart. You mean that body control thing he does? Eric bobbed his head and bounced in his seat. That thing is so cool. Gemma nodded. The human body, depending on age and gender, carries about 60% water. He learned how to use that to stop nearly anyone in their tracks. Obviously, it wouldn't work on someone like you, Mr. Riker. From the back of the room, I heard bricks shift as Jack pumped a huge fist into the air. Heck yeah! But it does indeed work on Lord Inferno, she added, who is very much of human composition. That's how Triton managed to secure the city, and why he's everyone's favorite in the fight against Inferno's growing empire. He's getting old, though, Eric said thoughtfully. That's the rumor, anyway. He is, Gemma admitted. But don't let that fool you. He's got some fight left. Believe me, I spar with him all the time. The mental image of Gemma going up against Triton made me smile. That would be a sight to see. Gemma caught the smile and returned one of her own. How about you, Nick? She asked. You've been very quiet. How about what? I blinked. Who's your favorite superhero? I hesitated, wondering if I was going to be honest or not, but Matt's snort of derision behind me, no doubt prepared to bring up bad blood yet again, convinced me to be utterly honest. Well, you are, I said, simply. This was news to Gemma, whose brows lifted up into her hairline. Me? I haven't done anything. Why me? Most of the class were floored by her utter humility. If you asked anyone on the street what Amazoness had done, the list would be long indeed. For me, though, what she had done was plain and simple. You saved me from the island, remember? Oh. She leaned back against her desk, eyes off in distant memory. Triton and I were both on that mission. He pulled just as much weight as I did, you know. Well, yeah, but you checked in more than he did, I pointed out. Besides, I really like your power set. Growing to the size of a building has got to be really useful. Can't imagine many villains would be willing to pick a fight with you when you can just stomp on them. Ha! Gemma shook her head and chuckled. The rest of the class followed along, though Matt was still stubbornly silent at the back. I ignored him. It's true, she admitted. I really like that part. Gemma and I locked eyes,
and I held them while I remembered the rescue from years ago. Much of it was a haze of running and panic, but I remembered her warm insistence that everything was going to be all right. At the time, I wasn't certain I believed her. I wasn't even certain I wanted to leave, but it turned out to be true. Later on, I was thankful they'd both come for me. I don't know what I'd be if you never came for me, Gemma, I said before correcting myself.